before I go any further, I think it's only right we get these fantastic musicians a good round of applause. So at this point, I'm just delighted that our chairman of Cavan County Council, Councillor Paddy MacDonald, is here to officially welcome you.
As Cohera Cora Conran Cavan, Ta Falsha Road, Agat Galera Nut. As Chairman of Cavan County Council, I would like to welcome you all here tonight. I would especially like to welcome Noel and Elizabeth here, and hopefully you've enjoyed the evening's entertainment with them. Noel is one of our most recognised poets in the county and nationally. Last Thursday I was at the wonderful launch of Brendan McCann's Erin Valley, and Noel was the guest speaker. He gave us all an understanding of the work of the poet and what makes a good writer. Noel is a generous man with his many gifts. He is a teacher, a master poet, a mentor to many artists throughout Ireland. His work with Windrush Publications is to be commended. It's a great pleasure to welcome you all to this conversation. Elizabeth Largy, as a musician and a scholar of English, is the ideal person to talk to Noel. Elizabeth, I am looking forward to hearing your conversation with Noel. Gura mai hagat galea.
As our chairman said, this is a wonderful night for you, Noel, but it's a wonderful night for literature. It's a wonderful night for Cavan. It's a wonderful night for Ballyjem Stuff. And it's a wonderful night for Cavan County Museum. I would now like to introduce to you three of the students from St Clair's: Cian Brady, Tara, Kieran's Almer, and Amy.
Is that one?
Yes, so I'm sorry, Amy. I really am sorry. We're going to recite or read very beautifully, because I've heard them already today, three of Noel's poems before we start the evening. Thank you.
Curve of the Moon by Noel Monahan. Watch for her shadow behind the clouds, cradle of light in her arms, maiden, mother and moon, ladle full of milk in the stars, hushed melody of winter snow.
The Funeral Game by Noel Monahan. That winter we came to terms with death. Every shoebox was a coffin for anything small and dead, and we wrapped them in calicos, velvets. We grabbed hats, coats, umbrellas from the hallway to dress as mourners. Someone struck an iron girder in a hay shed to sound the funeral bell. John Joe beat the Dead March on a saucepan. We held wakes, issued death certificates to old crows, kittens, chickens, lined the graves with stones, erected crosses with ash sticks. We pretended to cry, struggled with Latin prayers. Genuflected in the direction of a windbush. The rain pelting down, we left by a side gap. Back to the hay shed for tea, bread, butter, for all who travelled long journeys.
All Day Long by Noel Monahan. At school we see ink spilt on the floor. Children get bored, counting, conjugating verbs, all day long. You never know when some disappear. You never know where to find them. Teachers are patient, see with their eyes. Children, not easily tamed, see with their hearts. and are made to sit in rows, in blue and navy uniforms. How can you know when some disappear? How can you know where to find them? Principals, deputy principals, constantly counting the children. Mornings and afternoons, names and numbers put on files. One never knows when they go missing. One never knows where to find them.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, I'm just going to ask the Irish music group to play a piece of music, and then they're going to sing Danny Boy for us, and then we're going to go into the interview or the conversation.
like a child again. I feel like a 13-year-old facing you in first year again.
Oh no.
It's an honour to be here, first of all.
My privilege, Elizabeth, I'm delighted to be here. And could I just interject there and say that I loved hearing the poems read, and you read them so beautifully, and the music was just thrilling. And it's great to see the tradition in St. Clair's continue on all the time. So it's a great pleasure to be here. And I just feel a great affinity with Ballygymstock because I loved teaching in St. Clair's College for 36 years. That just flew. And just wanted to say that and to thank the Cathaoirleach and everybody for coming out tonight on such a cold night, on such a night as this.
I wanted to ask you that because we do have this image of the poet sitting in his garret writing in isolation, and yet here we are in the corridors you walked in as a young teacher,
right,
in front of a community who consider you very much their own, whether you like it or
great.
not.
I love that, yes.
How does that feel for you?
Well, it feels great, to be honest with you. You are right that there are two sides to writing, you know. There is the lonely part of it, and you know, when you go into your room and you concentrate there, and for a number of years now I've stuck rigidly to that discipline, and then as a poet you have to come out and sell yourself to a certain extent by doing readings and promotions and talks and all that, and that's enjoyable to a point. So there's a mixture, you know, there's going away and hiding away for a certain amount of time and then coming back out and facing the public, and the interaction of both, you know, that's part of it really.
In some ways, I think, speaking as a student, and I think a lot of people here would have known, it was almost like you lived a double life.
Right, yeah. Don't tell that to Anne.
Again, I agree. You know, we had this sense of you getting up early in the morning and writing, and then coming in and facing us and giving all of your energy to us, then going home again and maybe getting in the car and driving to Oma. How did you do?
Yeah, you're right. I used to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning, you know, because I felt that I can write in the morning, and that's the best time. So I'd maybe get up at 6 and I'd write until about 7:30 or thereabouts. And about 10 to 8 I'd leave and come into the school. Usually arrived in at 8:10 and started doing the rounds as a deputy head, or I'd go to room 5, my favourite room in the school, you know, and then I just prepare for class really, and you know, get into the atmosphere and all that. So there was that element of moving all the time and then in the evening I went home and I either went back to study for at least another 3 hours, or else I might be going to give a talk or a lecture or whatever I was doing. And I found myself going to Dublin quite a lot in the early stages, you know, because it's important to go to Dublin. You know, it's very important to go to Dublin. And they always say, and did you come all the way up from Cavan, which is only, of course, a short distance, it's only an hour and a half. And then are you going home to the sticks tonight? And I say, yes, I am, yeah. So there is a little division between the Dublin poetry and rural Ireland, you know, as such.
And there are a lot of divisions, I suppose, in your life, conflicts. Longford, Cavan, father, husband, teacher, poet.
Yeah.
You know, how did you marry all of those things?
Well, I was born in Granard in County Longford, and I love Granard, you know, I mean, I always did. It's my native place. You know, I'm very proud of where I come from. It often gets bad press, as you know, most of the time, you know, but at the same time, I went there, and you know the way a sense of place, in the first, you know, 12 years of your life, it sucks you in. And, you know, I mean, the landscape began to grow inside me, you know, without ever knowing that, even as a child, you know. I went down to the Mercy Sisters in Granard, who showed a little mercy some of the time, you know, and we stayed there in the national school until we were 8 years of age. But then we had to go because we were growing into men, after 8. And you had to go to an all-boys school then and leave the girls alone. And that made me think a lot about the whole situation. So I went up to what we called the Masters on the Hill. And there I got a good education under a Master Fitzgibbons who was strict but excellent teacher. And that gave me an advantage really when I went to secondary school. I didn't have to do any Irish grammar in the 5 years I was there. I did it all in national school. I started Shakespeare in national school. National school was great really when I look back. They gave you a great start as such. And then, of course, I went boarding then to St. Norbert's College, Kilnacrot, and I was there for 5 years. And my next collection of poetry is entitled Chalk Dust, and is based on my years spent there, happy and hungry. Happy and hungry, I'd say.
You did call the 50s a proverbial wet summer, I remember.
I did, yes, it was. Yeah, but that was the old Ireland. I was born into the old Ireland, really, as such. It was the old Devil era Ireland. And do you remember of 1943, the famous speech of Devil era on St. Patrick's Day about the comely maidens and the dancing at the crossroads and athletic youths, and you had all that sort of flamboyant rhetoric, really. But in de facto, it was a very dull time. The church was very strict at that time. And in many ways, in Granard, we lived really a life, everybody lived a type of monastic life. And the whole year's calendar followed a very definite plan. Advent was penance, then Christmas celebrations, then Candlemas, and then you're moving into Lent and all that. So the liturgy was very important, really, and the Catholic Church really has influenced my work in many ways. As you know, and I did the same with Catherine and the whole lot of us, really.
And to go back to that as well, because in your own family, of course, where you were split between farmers and priests, would that be fair to say?
That's right, yeah. Our home in Granard was in Ballingall, Granard. It was known locally as the presbytery because there were so many priests coming and visiting. It was a high mass in Granard. My mother would be entertaining at least 8 or 9 priests. So I can remember going in maybe at 11 o'clock or 12 o'clock in the afternoon and into the sitting room, because only priests got into our sitting room. We didn't get in ourselves, So I came in really when I was very small, and all I could see was the place was full of smoke. Somebody was smoking a big pipe. He was almost on fire. And somebody else, they were smoking John Players at the time, and they were drinking brandy and whiskey, as such, after the high mass. So you had a lot of priests around, we had a lot of relations priests. So the options were, you either become a farmer or you became a priest.
Your brother became the farmer.
He did, yes.
And you became the priest.
I was, when they were thinking about it, they were thinking about it, and I did go to Maynooth for 1 year, and at that time, there was in the region of, I would say, 86 students entered the college that year, 86 first years, I remember being on the bus in Dublin, taking it at the quays, or the Liffey there, and then it was Route 66, it was unusual, it was number 66 bus, and that brought you to Maynooth, so we dismounted and carried our cases in, and then I went to Logic House, and I was given a number. I was number 59. I think next to me, 60, was Seamus Hussey. But then Seamus Hussey was sitting beside me in the church, because that's the way they operated it. You got up at 6 o'clock in the morning and you went to the church for meditation. But he observed that the books I was reading in meditation weren't apt for spiritual development. I was reading the Communist Manifesto by Karl Marx. And Seamus Hussey says, do you know, Noel, I knew you had no vocation. I knew you wouldn't last a minute. So I left.
And did you, when you were making the decision to go, did you actually think that you may like to
that I would like
To be a priest.
And see, in the early stages, you gave it as a try. There was that aspect of it. I don't know at that stage was I mentally developed enough to know what I was getting myself into. Because career guidance was very short and very little in those times. You were given a few pamphlets, you know what I mean? Read those and see where you want to go. So in other words, you know, farming, priesthood, background, you know what I mean, religious background in that sense. You just move towards minute, really, rather than I'd say it was a mature decision, you know. I think my faculties were, you know, weren't fully developed, you know, to be honest. You know.
And when you were 12, you left Granard, but yet Granard is, we might take an extract from Diary of a Town if we could, if we're comfortable to do that.
I'd love to read a piece from Diary of a Town. In fact, this long poem, I'm hoping that Paul McIntyre will get back to me again, because Aaron Monahan and Deirdre Monahan dramatised their sections of it, and they did a wonderful job on it, really, you know. This section I'm going to read, it's about the dream world. And I think as a writer, you have to realise that we're not all the time thinking in a rational way. And this is about the people in Granard when they went to bed, when they were asleep. Because when you go asleep, you're not really asleep. You're dreaming, and your subconscious is always working. So you never take a full rest. And I think that's the trick with poetry and with good play writing and all that, that you have to study the subconscious and be aware of it, you know. So this is about the Granard people while they're asleep. And it's the collective group of people, all of them, you know, different people and their names and what they did. I changed the names because I don't want to be up the steps of the courthouse, you know what I mean, just in case anything goes wrong. Winking stars appear, little windows to our souls in darkness. The town's voice quietens into the night. Inner voices of the people sing to themselves in sleep. Their voices rise above the chorus of the day. Above the crowd, mob and congregation, they sing alone in sleep. Mary Major screams internally. Someone is walking inside her heart, and she feels the thud of his boots in her blood. Mother Angela sprinkles children's tears about the playground. Bugan Kiernan, retired commercial traveller, rides a bicycle through the roads and byways of his dreams. Canon O'Kane, parish priest, carries everyone's cross up Main Street, up the hill, across a desert of ploughed land to a field of stones. Mark the barber looks into a big mirror and shaves the dead face of every man in town. Mary Verdon remembers her childhood and cries all night beside the pulper in the shed. Mrs. Blaney writes messages to herself every day and reads them aloud in her sleep. Dear Mrs. Blaney, remember to leave the key under the mat, just in case Mr. Blaney returns unexpectedly from the grave, and report the scoundrels of children that knock and kick down your door to the master, the nuns, the priests and the guards. And don't forget to boil the potatoes and pay for the milk and the bread. And God willing, leave money for the priests in case you die in your bed. Yours truly, Mrs. Blaney.
As a child, I suppose, up for those first 12 years, the characters in the town, your own parents, they feature heavily throughout your work.
Yeah.
How important, or have they, I mean, obviously they're always in the back of your mind, are they very much just always with you, or how does it work to call on them?
They're always with me.
Like ghosts? Or?
Yeah, they're ghosts, because when I go on holidays, you know what I mean, I love going to Italy because they have lovely Baroque churches and I love the insides there and I like candles. And in many ways, one of the poems in the next collection is when I go on holidays, I bring my dead relations with me. So a lot of times you carry people around with you in your memory. They never go away, you know, so they're ghosts really, you know. And as you can see, that was a ghostly piece, you know, where they're still alive, you know, as such. And you're remembering, because as a child you're a sponge. You're taking in a huge amount of information. You're not old enough maybe to analyse it, you know, correctly, like we say the vocation of going to minute, but you're still taking in a huge amount, and it is internalised. And I'm a great believer in the interaction between the conscious and the unconscious. Most of my writing, most of my thinking is an interaction, which is going out of date really, you know, because mythology is now on the way out, you know, as such, and
Smartphones.
Smartphones and all that, and I'm doing a project like that on language at the moment, where, you know, the way the text messages and how language is changing and all that, you know. So
Depressing.
it's different, you know what I mean. But we cannot stop the onward march of people and technology, you know. But I wish they would take it a little easier, you know, because the intensity of change always annoys, you know. I accept change, but the intensity that we have. Remember with I think it was that poem, the new bypass. You know, you had that.
Slow noise of always dying. Isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. The slow noise of always dying, and that I think that was from one of the poems. Is it Where the Wind Sleeps? Was it? Yeah. And I was out in Loughree. I was down in the islands in Loughree on the Shannon, you know, and there's several islands there. And when you visit them, you come across the ruins of the monasteries. And I'm fascinated with the ruins of monasteries. Because, you see, I still feel there is an energy there that's dying slowly. You know what I mean? A spiritual sense in a place. You are on an island and you find yourself looking at the ruins of the monastery, and you're the only person on the island. There might be a sign up, beware of the bull or something like that. But otherwise, you know, when you're there on your own, and you can find, you know, the atmosphere just coming inside you. And I think that the energy, you know, is a poem is an energy. Any creativity, any piece of music, the students here, you know, that was all energy, you know, as such, and it can be a beautiful thing, you know.
And talking about the energy of buildings, at the age of 12 you left Longford behind you for the Drumlands of Calvin.
Yes.
What was it, probably only about 8 or 10 miles, was it? From
That's
there to
all,
Kilmacud?
yeah. See, you know, really, John Montague used to love joking about that. You know, he says, oh, you made a big journey,
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
massive.
You left, but at the same time, I did cross the Black Pig's Dyke, that old historical, you know, border area between Ulster and the rest of Ireland and the west of Ireland and all that. So, and that's just outside Granard, you know, that Dunkla or Black Pig. And I'm always fascinated with the name Granard, because does it mean ugly height? No, it doesn't. You know, does it mean the height of the sun? More than likely it does. But we in Granard always had a habit of mispronouncing words. So does it mean Tronard, the height of the sow, or the Black Pig? That's a possibility, you know what I mean? So I love place names and that whole Din Shankies thing idea. So I did make the big move down the road to Kilmacud.
And 5 years there.
5 years there, yeah.
And a lot of learning.
So, yeah, you know what I mean? The excitement, some great teachers there. Of course, I was taught by Professor O'Connell, Phil O'Connell. He was elderly at the time. Now, he wrote Schools and Scholars of Breffni, and he also wrote the history of the Diocese of Kilmore. He was a PhD, I think, in science. I'm not too sure there. But he was an interesting character, and he ended up teaching us French, you know. And he was elderly at the time, and we should have been listening more. Let's put it that way, you know. Teaching, I'll always remember a Father Kenny, who was an excellent Irish teacher. And again, I enjoyed, in fact, I fell in love with Irish poetry, and as you know, I get involved with translating Sean O'Riordan's work. It's published out in Yale University, and I was delighted to have that opportunity, but a lot of that would go back maybe to first Irish teacher, and then of course I had John Mead for Latin, and he was an extraordinary teacher. He was a great teacher. I'm delighted to say that somebody in Poetry Ireland said, look, we're trying to promote schools and teachers, and you were once a teacher, you know what I mean, will you write about who inspired you? And I said, well, really, the Latin teacher probably inspired me, and the Irish teacher inspired me more maybe than others, you know. And just said, would you write a poem about him? So I did, and Poetry Ireland published it. And lo and behold then, when in France, they took a translation of it, and they liked the poem, and it's translated into French, you know what I mean? So it's, so John Mead, I got you there. Yeah.
In terms of you going on to be a teacher then,
Yes.
and some would argue you were the closest thing to a revolutionary around here in the 80s and 90s with you were certainly a dissenting voice, I think, which was a good thing, and you were forcing us to think for ourselves and be very provocative, as a lot of the teachers did, but certainly we all came out of your class with a lot to think about.
Yeah.
Did you think you got that while you were in school, or was it in a reaction to what you didn't get in school?
It was a reaction to what I didn't get, to be honest, because I always felt and still feel that the questions are much greater than any answer you can give. So I was always fascinated with the questions. I think once I had opened the door of room 5, this is the room where all the important questions are asked, and we don't have all the answers. So one parent was very worried about it and says, and you mean to say you don't know any answers? So, you know, it can be misread too as well. So I had to, you know, get through it. But my idea is, I taught history, you know, to yourself, and you were an excellent student, of course.
Can't say much
No,
today.
you know, but when I was teaching history, you know, I was aware that, you know, how do you teach history? There's so many different values. And it's value orientated. And it's about winners usually write history books, you know, as such. So you had the history, really, the church had, you know, dominated a lot of church history in the early stages. I suppose I was lucky. Maynooth was a great college, you know, and I mean that, you know. I was lucky and privileged to have a person like Tom Fee, Cardinal Tom Fee, teaching me history. And he was excellent, you know, and he gave both sides. So it wasn't just my originality, it was a good education in Maynooth that opened the doors there to, you know, show it on both sides and let the students draw their own minds, you know what I mean? Never propagate, you know what I mean? History is about really searching for values. But you don't always get the answers. And history every generation tells its history differently, you know, as we can see now, you know.
And how did that that way of looking at things, how did that go down in these corridors here?
I never got any problem with it, because, you see, if students are getting results, you're okay. It's when they don't get results you might be in trouble. So I felt, you know what I mean, I taught in this building, you know, as such, and I found Mother Bonaventure was the first principal, and she was a very open-minded person, you know, and like, there was I coming in, you know, and I'd just flew in from London. I'd been working in a pub there in Kilburn, and I had long hair, and I had a 3-piece suit, all right, you know, but I had the John Lennon glasses, you know, a little tints on them. And then I was asked to go out, and she said, you put down on your CV that you could do music with the students. Will you come out here and sing a hymn, Hail Queen of Heaven? So I said, oh my God. So out I went up to the grotto. It was just outside, and the girls were all gathered round, and they thought it was hilarious. Here was this fella, you know what I mean, in the rig out was John Lennon singing "Hail Queen of Heaven." They, it was just hilarious. But I got on with that nun, and I was mad enough to take on the Mikado, I think 2 years afterwards, and to direct it. But we managed to do it because there was a great cooperative staff, as there is today in St. Clair's. It was a great staff. And there was the parents were fantastic, and the pupils would try anything. You know what I mean? They'd actually believe you, and then the nun was, you know, instead of asking your credentials, well, have you an MA in music or something like that? Because I had 3 different teachers, and I failed most of them, you know. It was Maggie Dick, they called her, in grammar. She taught me the music. She used to play the local organ. And then I had 2 teachers in Kilmacross teaching piano. But I never I just about couldn't read music, you know, such. And I ended up
Writing
writing
hymns
music,
in
you know,
here,
and
the
things
first
like
here, yeah.
That's right,
Writing
yeah.
a lot of hymns.
Hymns and things like that, yeah. Yeah, because I love church music. I adore church music. You know, we was just at the Lasses were Eva O'Donovan's group were down from Dublin, and they were performing in the Pastoral Centre on Monday night. And they were absolutely brilliant. Now, I'd go anywhere to hear a choir like that. So I mean, liturgy when it's performed at that level is just exhilarating. It's wonderful. You know?
And like you've dabbled in music,
Yeah.
You've excelled in drama, and you've kind of settled on poetry. Would that be fair to say? Or?
Yeah, I suppose really, you know, when I was in Ballygee stuff in the beginning, I was part of a group, the Molly Maguires. There were 2 other teachers. I won't name them.
Go on,
just in
go
case
on,
they're here.
yeah.
There were two other teachers in the group, and we called ourselves the Molly Maguires. So make way for the Molly Maguires. They're drinkers, they're liars, but they're men. Now that was at the time when ballads were popular, and we ended up going to places like Kilmalek, and we were playing. I were in the Cozy Bar here in Ballygee and stuff. We were in Ballyborough. One afternoon on St. Patrick's Day, we were out in Arva, you know, and we were actually possibly getting as much money for singing in the bars as we were for teaching, you know. But should have maybe.
It's not too late.
No, yeah.
We might take a bit from an extract from Chalk Dust from your new collection just before we move off the school.
Yeah, right, okay.
Your early education. Anyway.
Right. This is a short piece. It's about the refectory and our eating habits and the menu that was available. Extract from Chalk Dust, the college refectory. The hatch opened in the college refectory. Clatter from skillets and pans. Lids strayed away from pots. Cups and saucers sang from trolleys. Someone bent a spoon. There was great steam coming from a cauldron. And John Joe, a young cook, prodded something with a long fork. It was important to be well in with John Joe. He was in charge of pots in the kitchen, pots of spuds, pots of stew, pots of custard, pots of prunes. We dined underground at long tables, so hungry we could eat the timber. The refectory was a basement meant for a storeroom. A statue of St. Joseph stood on a wooden pedestal with nothing to say. Food in St. Norbert's College was the science of small measures. The minimum amount of everything: bread, margarine, porridge, potato mash. We had cheese and a dollop of red jam on Friday to make the stale bread bearable and palatable. Sometimes we had 2 prunes and a ladleful of custard for dessert. The dean, with an anorak over his white habit, intoned, "Bless us, O Lord, and these thy gifts." The noise was mighty. A sea of teacups rattled. 80 chairs scraped the concrete floor. Feet shuffled and a symphony of knives and forks commenced. We had porridge mornings except on Sundays when you were treated to a sausage. Everything we ate came from the earth. Carrots, potatoes, turnips, peas. Tiny peas, hard as bullets. The stew was brown on Tuesdays with meat, if you could find it. A line of mouths open to thick slices of loaf bread with marmalade on Thursday. Butter would be nice, but you accepted margarine. Every morning and evening, the fat teapot sat on the table, waiting to draw. Michael John grabbed an extra sausage, and the dean spotted him, and he had to give it back. A fly zzz in the jam jar. The flies would talk to you in May. They knew it was getting close to the long summer holidays, and the refectory would be closed. Zzz. I am a fly. I am a food eater. I will eat food long before the other eaters of food can get their hands on it. Zzz. The lids returned to the pots. The hatch door closed. The dean intoned, "We give thee thanks, O Almighty God, for all thy benefits."
It's very bleak.
Well, there were hungry days.
So you talked us hungry days, as you say, and then fast forward to when you finished teaching, which was about 9 years ago.
That's right.
Height of the Celtic Tiger.
Yes.
When you juxtapose your school days and the school days of, or not to call millennials, isn't that the awful word that they call us now? What do you see?
Modern education today, really, yeah.
And life and,
And
money
life,
and
life,
everything.
okay, yeah. Well, today, the Department of Education appeared, this is just my own personal opinion, appeared to be obsessed with calculations and filling in forms. When I was teaching, I think I might have had 3 inspections in 36 years, And those inspections were brought about by ourselves because we started that famous humanities, which was revolutionary at that time. Do you remember we had history, geography, English, local writers, and civics, all as one subject. It was timetabled. And the Department of Education were fascinated by it, and one day we had 3 inspectors. But that was a surprise, But now I think, today, the Department of Education needs to allow the teachers much more freedom, the freedom that I had, to do the important things, and that is the extracurricular thing. I think there was, the attitude to the history, they were thinking of dropping it or reducing it. So what do they think we are? Education is about life. It's not about getting a job. It's not about a salary. It's not about economic success. It's about living and the quality of life and humanity, such. And that's what school is about. So they need to look at that much more carefully. I think there's been the Celtic Tiger, was a mad time. I don't want to point a finger at any one group. We were all mad at that time to a certain extent. But it wasn't a good time because, you see, you had a movement away from that old Ireland or a church-dominated Ireland then into a more secular Ireland. And that secular Ireland is around and is not a happy place. And as you know, a lot of crime happening in it as such. So there's an emptiness or a void there, and they're asking too much of schools, but I really think that they have to start getting back to giving more freedom to the teachers and especially to the principals, and that's very important, Yeah.
Before we move off that, we might do school days, school children.
All right, school children, yeah.
You've written a lot of poems about school children, and we heard All Day Long, and there are a couple feature in your different collections.
They do. See, St. Clair's was a magical place for me. I was very happy there, you know what I mean, and I enjoyed it. If I had the life to live over again, I'd come to the same place and I would do much the same things. Very few can say that, you know what I mean, and mean it, you know, because I was very happy there. I think we all were, really. The school children, see, this is the point about Room 5, and I was always worried about, you know what I mean, the whole idea of what you give to the children, you know, as such. And this was a cold morning, and you remember the books and going round, and I was in 5 looking out in the garden, and the frost in the window, you know. School children. I see them through an open cube of winter light that sits on a bleak lawn between 2 windows. Obscured by condensation, their vague shapes move as if on a Monet canvas. Bluish strokes elbowing their way. School ties are ripples, piled up books in their arms, driftwood, in some half-crazy river flowing past into Bedlam. And when the electric bell penetrates the morning, they'll flood these empty rows with fury and purpose. What words can I give them to put on their pages? So it's always, I always thought about giving answers, and I was slow to give answers. My provocation was always about the questions, you know, and I always felt that would get people thinking, because I think that's what education is about, really, you know.
I think it did, surely.
Yeah.
To move on from teaching, was there a particular moment when you felt like you were the artist or the creative, or was there a moment when you thought, I've got poetry cracked, or I'm an outsider? Did you feel like that, or is that too simplistic?
No, it's not too simple. But it doesn't happen, you know, there's never a moment where you can say it, you know. All I could see was that I had a tendency towards the arts, you know, and I loved music, you know, but I knew at that time, you know, at a time that I needed more academic education to pursue it, that you could do it maybe at a local level, but to run at a national level, I knew there were difficulties, you know. So, and then I remember when I had written the Mass and Deirdre of Sorrows, you know, I mean, that musical, people said to me, you know, the music is just, of course Martin Campbell was working with me in the music, you know, they said the music is lovely to a degree, but lyrics, you have a way with words. So people were beginning to say that. And then one wet summer, the wet summer of '85, I was down in Galway and I wrote a poem entitled The Bishop's Gallop. It was really about history. It was about how could St. Patrick have got around Ireland, considering the terrain that was in it, and with such rapidity and success. He couldn't have. So I began to realise that history, you know what I mean, was exaggerated all the time. And that's, what, you know, all about the questions and the answers, you know, so I knew that. So I wrote a poem to that effect, and I sent it down to Jessie Lendenny of Salmon Publications, that was in Galway. At that time, she was publishing established writers in Ireland, like many of them, very big names, you know, Evan Boland and all that. And I only sent her one poem, and she wrote back after about 3 weeks and said, we would like to publish The Bishop's Gallop in the next edition. I said, oh my God, this is great, like, you know. So I got excited. And then I sent the cardboard box fanning, that was the next poem, to the Honest Ulsterman in Belfast. And it was, again, publishing Seamus Healy and all the other names, Michael Longley, and they took that. So I began to say, you know, things might happen. And then I got lots of refusals. See, to be a poet, you must be able to take no.
Yeah.
You know, most people love to be poets, or would love to be, but they cannot accept rejection. I didn't embrace it, but I accepted it. Nobody ever embraces rejection. But you get those slips, you know. And then, you know, after a while, yeah, Poetry Australia went and Poetry New Zealand, and then I won a prize at Hastings, and I called it the Battle of Hastings. And I began to, and then I met Jessie Lendenny, and she says, yeah, we'll take a risk with you. You are a risk, you know what I mean, because you come from Cavan. And that's a risk in
It's one of the
itself.
best writers.
You see, yeah, you know, but she saw it as you won't sell. You know, Galway is as a university, Dublin's university, you are a country boy, you know. And there was that aspect of it. But she took, and then she came up to the first launch, and there in the courthouse, the place was packed. And she says, oh my God. So Jessie likes selling books, you know what I mean? So it was. Now, I began to think that I might be a poet after bringing out the first book.
That was
you know.
91.
That was 91.
Yeah.
So the Wet Summer of 85 moved statues. Remember
Yes.
that one? And then, so from 85 to 91. So there you go, what, 6 years, you know what I mean? So I'm glad I did wait. It's important for writers and emerging writers to get published in the right places and by the right people, by read publishers. I'd advise that. Sometimes when I'm giving workshops and they say, oh no, that's nonsense, this is Facebook time, we can say, but that's not, you know, you need other people to say that your work is okay, not yourself.
And I remember my mother buying Christmas cards of yours.
Yeah.
Two of your poems were on Christmas cards that were
Yes.
on sale all over Cavan.
Yeah.
Surely that was a real, when your poems on a Christmas card, you know.
Yeah, I still have them. I brought them in here. I've one, a new one by a painting by Corey Lynch. I think he's originally from Crossalot, the same Lynch is, you know, he's a great artist in RD. And he does several paintings. Actually, he's painting the cover of my next collection, Chalk Dust, and I have that. And I work with him, you know, I've been working with him for up to 10 years now, you know, and I love working with musicians and working with other people, you know, and bringing together the different art forms. So I'm still at the Christmas cards, you know. I love the idea, you know. I was born on Christmas Day, like.
Okay, well, of course, no.
Yeah.
And snow and fire, snow, fire obviously, but
Yeah.
the elements in general I think feature a lot in your poetry, and landscape,
Yeah.
like, you know, like, I mean obviously the richest part of Cavan that we think of in some ways,
Yeah.
not to take from East
I
Cavan,
know,
Tom
yes.
McIntyre Gamal, but West
Yeah.
Cavan really is a whole other.
It's a beautiful
Yeah.
place. You know, I go there for inspiration every year, every chance I can get, up to the Quilca Mountains, you know.
Was it true you were mistaken for a?
I was mistaken, yeah, for the wrong person. I was up there one summer because I was looking for the golden plover. It's a beautiful bird, you know, that you find that nests in the Quilca Mountains. And I had my book out and, you know, the usual thing, and this fellow was in the bog, you know, and spotted me. So he came running up and says, what the hell are you doing here? You know what I mean? He thought it was an official from maybe the county council or some other, and I was checking out the bogs and where they using it and so I said, no, for God's sake, don't hit me. I'm a poor poet from Cavan. So, you know, and I mean, for me, there's a temenos or, you know, being a sacred space, and the Quilca Mountains is one. Drumlane Monastery, for some reason or another, the ruins, I keep going there. I don't know why. I'm dragged to those places. It's a subconscious thing. Remember I said we're subconscious in many ways, you know, and poetry, real poetry is about the subconscious. I love William Blake, you know, I love Patrick Kavanagh, and they were all caught in that web of the subconscious or the metaphysical, transcendental type, you know, in poetry, where poetry and prayer are one and the same thing, or poetry and cursing are one and the same thing, and the Irish language is great for both.
And I think you mentioned Kavanagh there, and
Yeah.
I mean McGahern, McIntyre. There are a lot of people whispering in your ear.
Yeah. There were, yeah. I mean, I got great support from people like Tom McIntyre. You know, I used to go to his house when he was living in Mullalower, and he called it the University of Mullalower. But it was a privilege to work with him, because Tom McIntyre, to me, was the essence of a Cavan poet. On his own, way out there, long before the rest of us came on the scene. He was out there, he was a pioneer. He had been a teacher in Clongoose Wood. He had established himself, really, you know, as an Irish poet, and established himself as a great playwright. You know, his plays in the Abbey Theatre are fantastic. So it was a privilege to meet him. Also, John Montague gave me great help and encouragement because he had a connection with Abilara. He used to spend the summer with his aunt in Abilara, and then I was in Granard, and met him in Annaghmakerrick, and we had a great time, and we hit it off. And he gave me a blurb for the book here. Noel Monahan is from Granard, that strange Midland town which has wormed its way into modern Irish consciousness. He has now moved as far as Cavan, like travelling from Lexington to Concord. So that's what they're both the same place, you know. He can read the old signs, afterbirth on the hedges, the white kiss of milk into the bucket, but he has to live in a different moral climate from the thistle-choking parish. The tree camels eat silage now, and exiles throng the Christmas bars. It is a chill climate. White is his favourite word. The snow woman, an unexpected muse. But he has the energy to transform his region, opening windows for himself and others through the publication and readings of an Ulster town in the south. The ground the Kavanagh once ploughed is being slowly colonised. People like Noel Monahan are reclaiming the bog. That was very generous of John Montague, you know, to an emerging, insignificant poet really at that time, you know, so you do need a blessing. So McIntyre, you know, Montague, they were two guiding lines, and then along came Shane Connaughton and Michael Harding, you know, and then Heather Brett, of course, I was working with all my life.
And you've gone on, there's so much to talk about, we could be here all night, but
Yeah.
like, cause, I mean, you've, the business of encouragement, I think, was what you know, in terms of Windows
Yeah.
publishing and some students here tonight who've benefited from that, and a lot of, you
We published yourself,
You did.
yes, right, yeah, as an emerging writer, and I believe you're doing very well now yourself, and keep it going, you know.
Say no more, but the Irish language, there's, as I said, there's so much to talk about, but the Irish language is hugely important to you, and
It's hugely important, yeah, it is, but because I have Granard Irish, you know what I mean. It's not the Gaeltacht by any means as such, but I have enough Irish to write in. And there are two people responsible for that, McIntyre on one hand and Maura Wakenty on the other. I remember introducing Maura Wakenty in Irish in Monahan Museum, about 25 years ago. And she said, "You write in Irish?" I said, "No, God, no, I wouldn't write in Irish." And she said, "Why wouldn't you?" I said, "Sure, I come from Granard." And she said, "But we need people, if they like Irish, to write English, you know?" And then McIntyre was writing in Irish, and he was much the same, he came from Baileybury, you know? So I began to love the language, you know, and to realise, you see, to be an Irish writer as such like Kavanagh, we did lose our tongue, you know, and that has to be one of the saddest things ever to happen to us. You know, colonisation is one thing, but to lose your tongue, to lose your language as well. Not only did you lose your little fields, but you lost your language, you know, and it happened very quickly, you know. And slowly, you know, I think in Virginia around Munchacollet, they were speaking Irish at the turn of the last century, you know, as such. The Quilca Mountains, you could have got Irish up there right into the 1950s, late 40s anyway, as such. So the language died slowly, but it's very important. Now, I think that the bardic poets, I wouldn't like to be associated with bardic poets because they were part of the establishment. But the best thing happened to poetry in Ireland was when colonisation actually happened, and the poets were thrown out on the road, and they became tramps, or walking from place to place. And you had people like Michel Raftery and Filla. You had Seamus Donald McCourt, you know, and you had up in the Cregan area beside Kavanagh, another poet. His name eludes me now. Just can't think of his name. Anyway, they were the real Irish poets. Fiachar MacBrodie, you know, being from Stradone or Drone area, and that's where the real Irish poetry, you know, began again, and there were free areas. And I think Kavanagh, you know, even though he hadn't the Irish language or didn't think much about it, the sentiments and the metaphors and all that, and the writing was pure Irish. And I'd like to think that, you know, writers like the William Carleton of Tyrone, that he he was conscious of both languages and started the Hiberno English, and then of course Synge took it up later and all that. So you had a slow movement into the language, and then Kavanagh, then Heaney, then Montague, you know what I mean? And hopefully,
Yourself,
you know,
yeah.
that's the. Sometimes Yeats. I mean, when I was out in America, Yeats would sicken you really. The Americans know so much about Yeats. They know very little about Kavanagh or about really. Heaney they like in a kind of a universal way, but not in an Irish way. Yeah, a class area, you know. So I think that the big house people had plenty of time and they wrote a lot. I come from big house people like Oliver Goldsmith, you know, down in Longford, and Mariah Edgeworth, you know. But give me the Cavan writers any day. You know,
in a world that we love snackable, bite-sized text messages, Snapchat, all this stuff, what is the future of poetry in a digital age like that? Can it thrive? Will it strive to? What's the future?
It's going to survive because it was never strong, really. You know, it's an inner spirituality. You know, to me, poetry is just not literature in the sense of writing a successful novel it's a much deeper feeling, you know. And as long as people know and are well educated for the quality of life that we need, you know, Kavanagh's line, the womb and tomb press lips in fondness like bride and groom. That's a lovely piece of writing there. You know, that, you know, in the end of the day, we all end up dying, you know. So our mortality is a very important thing. And I think that's at the very basis of good literature, you know what I mean, that realisation. Now, you know, you have Kavanagh, you know, who talks about the peasants in the Great Hunger, and the old peasant can neither be damned nor glorified, and he ends up with the peasant. The tongue in his mouth is the root of silence, the story is done. I would hope to think that it's a little bit more cheerful than that, but the Great Hunger is a wonderful piece of work, you know. And I think, you know, we will have poetry. I haven't a doubt about that, you know.
And you talk about mortality, and not to give away your medical history now, but you had your own brush with mortality recently.
Well, I did, yeah. 2013, you know, I had to get a new aorta valve, which is not a nice experience, really. The old ticker wasn't working well. I was down in Ennis, and my good friend Dennis O'Driscoll, the poet, had died, you know, and we were not celebrating, but we had a memorial reading for him in Ennis. And I had about 3 or 4 steps to climb up to the stage. And when I arrived, I was out of breath, and I was barely able to perform. And I said, you know what I mean, this is not good. You know what I mean? It's, so I eventually went through the process, and then I thought I'd get a few stents in. That's fashionable now to get stents in. So I said, that'd be a day and I'd be grand, you know what I mean? But he said, no, he says, you're for open heart surgery, you know. It was funny, you know, because to see the night beforehand, the priest came in, and he just had a look around. He says, Noel Monahan, yeah, you're for surgery tomorrow. You will, yeah. Will you need the sacraments and all that? And I said, I wasn't too sure how to answer that, so there was a pause. And then he says, I'm afraid you're not on my list. So I said, okay, that's all right, you know. So I wasn't on his list. I think that's in the long poem. It's a long poem, so I don't think we'll read it, you know. But I was full of morphine then, you know. And then the nurse says, you know, afterwards, to kill the pain, they give you this morphine, but you're as high as a kite. and you're as mad as a hatter. And I imagined there was a hole in the wall and people were coming in, you know, as such. And I was organising them. So the nurse says, no, you were a deputy principal in the school, weren't you? You're just an organiser, don't worry. Leave it to us.
Probably a good call.
Yeah.
And I suppose you're aging now, not to say the inevitable, but we all are. And your family continues, and you're facing another birthday this
That's
Christmas.
Right.
And as I say, we could chat all night, but it might be nice to end. You've become a grandfather in the last 5 years.
That's right, yes.
And what has that been like?
It's wonderful, really. You know, it's a breath of fresh air. It's exciting. It's a new generation, and they're lovely kids, and we're very proud of them. You know, and Anne and myself mind them once a week or twice a week, and it's great fun. You know, and very exciting. And this is a poem I wrote for Cara. You know, coming into our first Christmas. In fact, it was on Christmas night on the poetry programme on RT Radio 1, and I wrote it for that really as well. You know, read it. Yeah. A first Christmas for Cara. Christmas is still a secret for you. No memory tags. Santa with toys. The postman with Christmas cards, holly and ivy to remind you of a winter star in all of us. You share moments, smile, raise your hand, purse your lips. Your first sounds, not yet words, speak to us. Your blue eyes catch sight of the light on the Christmas tree, and you gaze lovingly at your brother playing with his toys. Outdoor, it snowed. It is snowing. It will snow. Indoors, wine glasses full, we toast your first Christmas. Stand around your cradle with smiles and tears, knowing Christmas is starting to become a place for you to live in. So that's Christmas.
I think I've asked enough questions. Does anybody out there have anything to ask Noel? Do you have a mic? Oh yes, Sabina has a mic if anybody would.
Remember, I'm not great at answers. You know? I love the questions.
You said it all. Thanks very much, Noel.
My pleasure.
Say,
Thank
if
you.
it hadn't been for you, I'd have been a physiotherapist. So I personally am very glad that you intervened in my career. Actually, Teresa Donnelly was another one who intervened. So
thank you very much.
So thank you.
My pleasure. I'm delighted
thank you for
to have this opportunity. You know, that both of us could meet so many years later. You know.
I think I speak for a lot of people, not just personally, but an awful lot of people throughout your 36 years here who you made a huge impression on, and you changed the course of our lives.
Thank you.
So thank you, and thanks for and they'll be reading this in 100 years.
Oh,
So
right.
that's great.
Thank you.
Warrior. Grandad, not just any man, as strong as a mule, hauling wheelbarrows of silage. 3 dogs follow, their master, protecting him from harm. Early mornings, cows ready to milk by dawn. Never known a man to work as hard. 87, nearly 90, as hard as nails. Lives with us, strong love bound tight, telling stories of times gone by. A world I will never know. Drafts, want a game, forever playing. His brain never stops, always gathering information. Crosswords, quiz shows, the list goes on. Always there, picks us up in his old caddy van, chugging along in second gear, just hitting 50. No van, don't worry, he'll drive the quad too. Up and down the fields, searching for the pesky weeds. Docks, thistles, brambles, all cower as the spray hits. Another hard day's work done. Cup of coffee and bread and honey keeps him happy till the supper is ready. Never ceases to amaze, my idol, 87 and counting.
Veins of trust, heart thumping, buzzing thoughts of wisdom and experience fall softly onto an open ear. An intense, cryptic language unlocked with a key of love. A language created with hardship and loss, carved into an S. My hope, my guardian angel, beats its wings of silk, enchanting me. Affection knitted like veins connect us from birth, igniting a flame, bringing a child to a peaceful sleep. The sorrow bleeds from my chest as you are not visible. My soul is punctured at the denial of your smell. Oh, how my heart was split into two, mother.
Always. You've always been fairly optimistic for someone whose father was hit by a train. And you've always been fairly easygoing for someone with a husband liable to heave bets on a single horse, God knows how many times a day. You've always said you believe in superstition, which could explain why your daughter was a bit of a goth. And you've always told me it'll break a bigger cross whenever anything goes wrong. Your house has always been full of plastic bags, which contain exactly what they are. And the betting slips Granda brought home, in your words, could have papered the walls. You've always been good-hearted and gentle, which still shows in your ancient face, but you've always been one to constantly convince yourself you could be sick even when you're okay. You did well, Nana. You married a man who has always loved you and worked hard. You raised 4 kids, and for them you'll always be there. And I know you'll always be there for me too, even when your heart sleeps sound.
Love
till my parents would wish me dead. It's go Jay to my poor means long. Shoo, shoo, shoo la room. Shoo go soccer og shoo go cue. Shoo go durs og selig long. It's go Jay to